Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
So welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Today our guest is David. So how are you, David, today?
Doing well. Thank you for having me on.
That's great. So David, will you let us know how did you start your business?
Okay. So you're asking about a long story. Well, it started. I went to school. Actually, I originally went to school wanting to get a degree in theology, but because of the separation of church and state, you couldn't get financial aid or anything for that. So I double majored in psychology because that always interested me. And somewhere along the way, I just kind of got caught up in that. I went on for my master's in clinical counseling and became a licensed psychotherapist. And so my first job in the field was working at a rehab, which I think every behavioral health clinician should start in a rehab because you get a little bit of everything. You have obviously the addiction issues, but there's co-occurring mental health issues. You're working with families, and so you kind of get a little bit of everything. From there, I was offered a position at a kind of the flagship model of this community mental health agency in our area. And there I worked with severe mental illness. So things like schizophrenia, bipolar, mental retardation, some of the more major like depressive disorders, things like that. The clinic made a shift to where they wanted to focus more on children. And I did that. I did my tour of play therapy and sand trays and all of that, but that I really felt more called to an adult population. And it was around that time that the company was offered a contract with Department of Corrections to develop an IOP program. It's a SAP program in the detention center in Hardin County. And so I was part of a team of about 6 people, and we built that program. Then they offered, it did well. They offered another contract to build programs in the clinic. So inmates could be released, they could kind of reintegrate, get a job, and then still get their treatment, in an outpatient setting. So that was really cool. From there, I was offered a position to build substance abuse programs for the East region, the catchment area. So it's 3 counties. And somewhere along the way, in the course of doing that, I made contact with a company that was looking for a clinical director. And I thought that I would be kind of stepping in and managing a program. I didn't know that it had to be built. And so the program was originally faith-based. And really, this part of my career, it was very defining and setting the course of what would happen, because when we started, they had 2 residential centers. One was like 100-bed and one was like your standard 28-day 16-bed. It was a BHSO facility at that time. And by the time I left, I was there about 5 years. We had like 6 different residential centers. Some were dedicated exclusively to women and where they could have their children. And we developed 3 intensive outpatient programs, 3 outpatient programs, a 4th that was medication-assisted treatment. And we also developed a partial hospitalization program. So it just exploded. We were in multiple counties, multiple cities. And it got to the point where I was managing so much and doing so much administrative stuff that I couldn't actually practice and see clients anymore. And so I was getting a little burnout, and I ended up making the shift to joining a private practice. And that's what I'm doing now, so I can see clients. But while I was at this other agency, building programs, going through regulations, those types of things, I learned a lot. And I already knew quite a bit about how to do that, but this was such a greater scale and scope of how much we had to do. But throughout that process, the CEO was friends with a lot of other CEOs that were doing similar work in the treatment space. And they were wanting to, either launch a program or they were wanting to expand a program. And so I would just kind of pro bono work with them, on here's what we're doing. Here's the ways you can do it. Here's the different setups. Here's some things to watch out for. And I got to thinking, this is something I could do on my own. And I was thinking about impact. So, as a therapist, you're limited in how many people you can impact. There's 8 hours in a day. Some work godly hours more than that, but you're limited by time. But when I took the job as clinical director, then it amplified my impact because I was counseling counselors. I was guiding them on how to do effective treatment and how to make a difference in clients' lives. And even then, though, that amplifies your reach, but you're still limited in terms of how far does that agency extend? How many clinicians does that agency have? And so when I launched my business, it was really focused on, it's called KINGED LLC. And the focus was on consulting to help treatment centers and those in the healthcare world to expand programs, launch programs, correct issues that are within programs. And so that's what I've been doing with the business. As I was doing that, I learned that I'd always kind of known this and I've been through it myself, but there's a very high incidence of burnout, and especially in the healthcare field. And so one of the things that I do through KINGED as well is provide burnout coaching. And it's not limited to healthcare professionals. I mean, the principles apply to anyone. But I developed a method called accelerated neural conversion, and that has helped me to bring about a state of change and to re-energize the passion that providers had, when they started in their field, or why did they become a lawyer or a business owner. And so that's kind of my path that led me to this. Primarily I provide psychotherapy counseling with the practice. I provide behavioral health consulting and coaching as well. So particularly for burnout.
That's impressive. So, with all these challenges, how do you market your business? While you have limited time, there are a lot of things going on. So, yeah.
Yeah. So starting out, one of the things that I determined that I wanted to do when starting the business is I didn't want to launch it leveraged and launch it with a debt or to be beholden. You can get an investor, but then they're going to take a percentage, or you've got, you take out a business loan, then you're starting in the hole. And so I was like, I'm going to do this whole thing myself. And so I developed all the different forms that are used, established the LLC. I actually built my own website using Squarespace. I have no knowledge of coding. It was a struggle, but we got her done. And actually, up until this point, I've been using that site. We're having it. I've got a web designer that's redefining it now because we've pivoted a little bit in terms of our approach. And so trying to make the website reflect that. But for a long time, it was a one-man show. I was just doing this while working, and seeing clients. So to other entrepreneurs, I would say, just stick with it. It might take you longer, but it's going to set you up for more success, because once I launched, I had zero debt and wasn't beholden to anyone. The downside to that is when you don't get, that kind of influx of funding, it's more difficult to advertise and to market. So I've depended, especially in the beginning, very largely on referrals, on kind of word of mouth, and then just organic, social media, those types of things. But since we're shifting gears a little bit, I'm wanting to ramp up a new advertising and marketing campaign as well. I'm working with a few professionals and the best way to do that. And so I'm excited to be on podcasts and things like this because you get to meet really cool people and see what they're doing, and I think that we can all learn from each other. But exposure, it's in a sense advertising. But I'm not advertising for the sake of advertising. I don't have any widgets to sell. I do this because I want to help people. I want to see people overcome the obstacles in their lives. I want to see them reach their potential. I want to see them break free of anxiety and sadness and fear, because the world is huge and it's full of great opportunities, but we're limited by what we see. And so my background in psychology informs everything that I do. There is a path that, if followed, will lead to success. And it's no different than if you're, I've talked about you training a soldier in the military, or training a dog, or training an employee at a new job. The process isn't very different between those. And if there is a process, if followed correctly, will bring about the results that you want. And so really, I think a lot of people just need to remember why they're doing what they're doing, if we're talking about burnout, and then take a step back, reevaluate their life. If they've gotten in a position where they're not happy with what they're doing, or they don't feel fulfilled, what changed? What went wrong? And helping them to rearrange the elements of their life and their lifestyle in such a way that they can kind of move to the third step, which is to conceptualize, to visualize, to dream about the future. And then the work we do together is building a roadmap so they can achieve that dream. And it's very doable. And a lot of times, once someone has that first breakthrough, whether it's an emotional breakthrough or a breakthrough in their business or what have you, it's just ground floor. I mean, you just stack successes from there. You continue to build because you've learned something. You've learned what works. You learn what don't work. And so that's one of the reasons why I do what I do. I love to see that happen.
So you meet new people every day, I believe, and obviously in your business you have to meet new people every day. So, what do you think, like, what the new entrepreneurs are facing at this point, like, majorly, other than investment or the money problems? What are the major problems of the entrepreneurs, maybe new entrepreneurs?
Some of the major problems. I mean, I can only really speak from my experience and from those that I've worked with, but quality staff is always a challenge. A lot of work nowadays is shifting to remote, and so you have contractors and things like that. So there's more options. It's a simpler
Mhm.
process, but you have to be very cautious too. Buyer beware. You know what you're getting. So making sure that you have good help. I think budgeting is a big piece of this, and a lot of entrepreneurs are good at what they do but not necessarily good at the details and the bookkeeping and all the stuff in the background. But that's critical.
Yeah.
You have to be, or and I would say, and if you're in a position where you can do this, you're always going to be better off to hire someone, to bring in someone from the outside to do things that aren't your areas of strengths so that you can focus on your areas of strength. I wasted, not wasted, but I spent a lot of time, building the website and doing things that were outside, my area of expertise. And so that effort isn't wasted, but it's not spent as effectively as it could. And I was limited, financially, but if you are able to have specialists come in, it's going to save you time. It's going to save you the trial and error. It's going to save a lot of headaches by having that guidance. And so that's a big piece. Challenges the entrepreneurs face. Well, advertising and marketing, retaining clients, I mean, is a big piece of that. A lot of that depends on your offering and how well you can ensure that resonates, with your audience, with the people that you're trying to reach. I would say that you need to demonstrate that you're the best person to do that out there, that you are the expert. And there can be lots of different ways. That might be the most, have the most knowledge, or it might mean that you have been around the longest, so you have the most authority or the strongest brand, or it might mean that you are able to really understand the client on a personal level, and that makes you the perfect fit. So refining those skills, getting good at that, don't promise that if you can't deliver it. But once you can, make that known. And you have to say that in a way that, I see a lot of business startups advertising, talking about themselves, like we do this, or our product is better because of this. And people really don't care. You need to talk about them. What they want, what do they need? Because if you can meet their need, then the battle's won. I mean, you've got a customer, and you're probably going to have a ripple effect and more from them. And it works in reverse too. If you do a terrible job or promise something and don't deliver, then word gets out.
Yeah, this is true. Like, we should undercommit and over deliver. So I think this makes a lot of things better. What online marketing techniques do you use?
Oh, online marketing. So I'm most active in LinkedIn because my focus is on professional development and growth. Also Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, to a lesser degree, YouTube channel. I have videos on my website. One of the things that if people are interested, they can go to my website and access an archive of articles that talk about the technique, that talks about different situations and ways to overcome them, an archive of videos that they can watch, very, very similar content, and a free book, my book, Accelerated Neural Conversion. It's Totally Possible is the name of it. And basically with ANC, what I did is I took some of the best techniques. So like counseling has a lot of exceptional techniques for helping people. And so things like Skinner and behavior modification, or things like Aaron Beck, and shifting thoughts, or recognizing distorted thinking and transforming those. There's a lot of pieces of that, but also it broadens, and the same principles are evident in the military, in the business world, in education, principles that help people to reprogram their brain, because everything goes back to the brain.
Yeah.
And we tend to develop, well, if you do something enough times, if you repeat something enough times, what your brain does is it automates it. And so imagine the first time that you tried to tie your shoes, or, I use the example of the first time you learned to drive a car, like you're super focused. It's all you can think about. And it's taking all your attention. You're watching your mirror. Should I use my turn signal? And, what do I do in this lane? And so, but after a while, like the brain goes, hey, we've got this down, and it just automates it. And before you know it, you're driving and playing with the radio and drinking coffee and whatever, and it doesn't matter. And so the brain just keeps doing that. It just keeps automating these programs, and it files them away. And the reason it does that is if we had to use that much energy and effort on every task that we did, like when we were first learning, then our bandwidth would be used up. we wouldn't have any mental capacity to learn new things. And so the automation process of the brain is extremely helpful, and there are principles to how that works. The problem is the brain doesn't discriminate. So it doesn't say, this habit of yours, this part of your life is good, so we're going to automate that and make that keep going. And this part's bad, so we're not going to automate that. The brain just says, if you do it enough times, I'm going to automate it. And so we have collections in our life, in our programming, in our file of things that are good and things that are bad. And when we try to make a change, it's often difficult because we're just trying to change one area. Like I want to eat less fast food. Okay, so you're looking at a behavioral level, but the brain is arranged in such a way where there are multiple pathways interacting, multiple neural pathways interacting. I call it a neural target. And so it's not just the food, it's also, so that will be a biological element. There's also a psychological element. Maybe you get enjoyment from that. Maybe that fulfills a need. So they call it comfort food for a reason. So maybe there's something deeper, something emotional that needs to be dealt with. Maybe it's social. Maybe it's that, you meet up with your friends every Tuesday evening and you eat out at McDonald's together. So it's not just the food, it's about the relationships and the connection. And that's a whole different neural pathway in the brain. And then even spiritually, the things that you believe, your value systems, all of those things come into play. So accelerated neural conversion identifies those different pathways that target where they connect and works to change each of those so that when the change is complete, the new behavior is automated. So what you're doing is you're automating success. And that's basically how it works.
Completely makes sense. So, will you please share with us some challenge you have ever faced, the biggest challenge you have ever faced, or maybe you are facing at this point as well? Like any challenge in your career that you can share with us?
Well, there's always logistical challenges, things like, marketing and budget and all of that. But I think the biggest challenge, and I would say this is probably true of a lot of entrepreneurs, is authenticity. Especially if you're starting out, it's almost like you have something to prove. And to a degree, you do. You need to prove to the marketplace that, what you're offering is valuable and that, what you say is true. But along the way, we can believe our own Instagram feed. The feed, it doesn't show the behind the scenes. It shows, the highlights. And
Yeah,
but there's a lot of behind the scenes with entrepreneurs that aren't very pretty. But we need to be authentic to that because if we blind ourselves to areas where we're weak, if we exaggerate our sense of importance or our sense of impact, if we forget that the basis of any business that's done is a relationship, then we're setting ourselves up for shipwreck. And that's automating a negative way of thinking, a negative way of being, and it's not going to bring about good things. So I think authenticity is huge, and it's a process not just external in how you relate to other people, but internally. Being genuine with yourself, being kind to yourself, giving yourself permission to make mistakes, or to fail, because failing is a big part of success. It's an unfortunate reality, but often it's the case. So I think that if we can allow our authenticity, our transparency to shine through, it's going to build trust. It's going to keep us on a protective path, and it's going to lead to greater impact, because if the basis of business is relationships, well, the basis of relationships is communication, trust. And unless you're being authentic, then you're already sabotaging it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, completely makes sense. Yeah. So, what advice would you give to someone who is thinking about starting their own business?
I would say to dream, visualize the end before the beginning, and it probably won't look like anything that you're visualizing, but you have to have a target to shoot for, and then get very specific. And so goals are incredibly important. I see a lot of goals that are, we can say we set goals and then we pat ourselves on the back. So I set this goal, but it's the quality of the goal that matters. So there's a formula called SMART, SMART goals, which is specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time limited. And so, if someone says, I want to be smarter, that's my goal. I want to be smarter. That's a terrible goal. How do you measure that? How do you know when you're smarter?
Yeah.
Versus a goal that says, okay, I'm going to get a 4-year bachelor's degree. Well, if that happens, well, we know you've learned some things. You've probably stretched yourself, developed some skills, and it's very measurable. We can tell what year we're at in that goal. We've got a deadline. Did you graduate? Did you not? If we can check along the way if there are issues and make corrections. And so I think with a business, that's very important as well. And in starting it, so start with good goals. Mentorship is very important. we can't see what we can't see. If we've got a booger on our forehead, hopefully we've got a good friend that'll tell us, because we're going to walk around and not know it. And so you need a mentor that can show you things that you aren't aware of, and can guide you in the direction that you need to go. Someone who's been through the things that you haven't been through. And I guess the last thing would be, have a high pain tolerance. If you are going to be an entrepreneur, you are, what's the expression? It's like chewing glass. You have to be able to deal with disappointments. You have to be able to deal with frustrations. You have to be able to deal with unprofessionalism. Yeah. And that's, if you don't have that inner toughness, it's probably not going to work out too well for you, because everybody's got to go through it.
Makes sense. Completely makes sense. So it was really nice to talk to you, David. I learned a lot. Me and Dan learned a lot from the podcast. So thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us. It was really nice talking to you.
It was
Thanks.
my pleasure. Thanks so much. Yeah, if anyone wants to learn more, they can download a free copy, my ebook, Accelerate Neuroconversion, on the website. Like I said, it's still under construction, so you might see, different versions, but the book is going to be the same. Also, all of those archived articles and videos are free, so feel free to check those out if anybody wants to. It's KINGED LLC, or you can just Google KINGED LLC, or dkking.com is the web address.
Thanks, David. Thanks for joining us. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Thanks so much.